Welcome to Awake to Oneness Radio. I am Caroline Chang, your host. The mission of Awake to Oneness Radio is to inspire the world to awaken to the universal truth of oneness. Science is teaching us that all life, that all matter is interconnected and interdependent. And also ancient wisdom and spirituality has been teaching us this for eons, that we're all one. So what you do to another person, you're literally doing to another aspect of yourself. And when mankind awakens to the universal truth of oneness, there will be peace on earth. Today's show topic is Enlightened Parenting with Meryl Davids Landau. I always have trouble with names, and this one I wrote down. But Meryl has written a book recently that just recently came out, and the title of the book is Enlightened Parenting, A Mom's Reflects on Living Spiritually with Kids. Now, when we scheduled this program, I didn't realize it was actually going to be Mother's Day weekend. So it's just so appropriate to be talking about enlightened parenting on Mother's Day weekend. Welcome, Meryl, to Awake to Oneness Radio.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be here.
Thank you. Yeah, I just, because we scheduled this show months ago, and I didn't even look at the calendar when we scheduled it, but everything happens in perfect divine timing. It's a perfect weekend, Mother's Day weekend, to be talking about enlightened parenting. So
I agree.
Share,
perfect.
Yeah, perfect. Everything, perfect divine timing. Spirit knew it. I didn't know it. But can you share with our listeners your journey, your spiritual journey, and how you came about writing this particular book?
So my spiritual journey began when I was in my 20s, and I was exercising at the gym. I really didn't have much of a spiritual practice or spirit. I kind of had a minor beliefs from growing up, but nothing that was really formed in any way. And I was at the gym one day in New York City. I was on the exercise bicycle, and I'll never forget this because it was so profound for me. This woman walked by, and I say walked by, but sometimes I say she floated by. She was so light. She was giving off such light. It's almost like she wasn't even walking on the ground. And I turned to someone on the exercise bike next to me, and I said, "Who is that?" And they said, "She's the yoga teacher." So I got off my bike, and I followed her into the room. I had never done yoga before. I wasn't really 100% clear on what yoga was. This was back a couple of 25 years ago, so yoga wasn't as popular then as it was now. And I just, that first yoga class, I just felt a connection with something larger than me in that class. And that was the beginning for me. So then after I went a number of times, I asked her for more, if she could give me more things to read. And she pointed me towards Swami Satchidananda, who was her spiritual guru. And he's written quite a number of books, in the yoga tradition, and so got involved in that, started teaching yoga, started going on retreats. I met my husband at one of his Swami Satchidananda's lectures. We went on retreats together. We did a lot of meditation together. We read a lot of spiritual books, and then we had children. And I'm sure most of your readers who have children know that puts an end to a lot of that, and rather abruptly, I might say. So here we were teaching yoga, we were going on all these retreats, and then we didn't have time for any of that. And after a very short while of that, I realized, okay, my spiritual practice is going to need to really change. And the number one way it's got to change is that I need to bring my spiritual practice into my parenting. Because I'm spending so much of my time parenting, I need to be trying to make that a more enlightened practice. I need to connect with my highest source.
How long ago was that when you first
So my children are my son is 25 and my daughter is 21. She just graduated from college last week. So both of my children are now officially launched into the world. But so the essays that are in my book, Enlightened Parenting, are essays that I started writing down in some form when they were much younger. And, you know, if I would have an idea or a thought would come to me and I would kind of scratch it down. In some cases, it was just a thought. In some cases, I wrote out a whole essay. So a lot of the material that's in the book kind of had its genesis from when I was really in the thick of parenting younger children. And then I kind of decided I needed a little distance and perspective, because things that seem so urgent when your children are little, and then you get a little distance on them, you see them in a different way. So I put the manuscript away, and I waited a number of years until I decided to take it out of the drawer. So and then of course I looked at it and realized I had to rewrite so much of it because it's been a long time.
The reason I asked you how old your children were, because I was just wondering, it's a very different world we're living in today as it was 25 years ago when you first had your children. So I understand I would say it would have been much more difficult, you know, keeping your spiritual practice in parenting at that time, 25 years ago. Today, I think it's a world of difference where they have yoga classes, yoga mommy and me classes, you know, and I have my grandson just turned 7, but he spent the summer with me last summer, and he was just sitting there one day meditating, and I didn't teach it to him. He had his legs crossed Indian style, eyes closed. He was holding his hands correctly, with his his index finger and his thumb together, like
a little mudra
you
there.
see people like a little Buddha. Yeah, he looked like a little Buddha too, because he's round like that. But so I was like, "Where'd you learn that?" He said, "In school. They teach." He goes to a charter school in New Jersey.
They are right. They are teaching more yoga in more schools, but it's still. I mean, it. And I agree with you. It's wonderful, and kids are learning yoga and they're learning a little bit more about meditation, but it's still primarily taught kind of stripped of its spirituality. It's about relaxing. It's about calming the kids down during the day or whatever. And I think all those things are terrific. So I agree with you from that standpoint. Children are exposed to more of these things. Still think as a parent, if your prime spiritual practice is something that takes you out of the house or that takes a lot of time in the day, when you have children, you lose that time. I mean, having kids are great, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. But you can't just go away on a week-long retreat when you've got a 6-month-old or even a 5-year-old. I mean, it's just much harder.
So true.
So for me, I'm very interested in how to bring spirituality pragmatically into a person's day-to-day life. So the novel that I wrote, which came out about 5 years ago, called Downward Dog, Upward Fog, and the premise of the novel is about a woman in her everyday life who discovers kind of new thought, spiritual teachings, and then wants to apply them into her everyday life. And I was very clear when I wrote that book that I didn't want the main character of that book to go to Bali or go to India or go someplace where she's taken out of her regular life and then has this kind of spiritual epiphany, which is common in books of that kind of genre. I really wanted her in her daily life with her work and her mother and her problematic boyfriend. How does she bring these teachings into her life? And Enlightened Parenting is kind of similar, because that's really something that I'm interested in, is just in your everyday life, taking esoteric teachings and making them day to day. And
can you share with our listeners some of the tips that you share in the book?
So the book is comprised of 55 essays, and I break it up into 3 sections. And so the 3 sections are attitudes and actions. And then the one that's probably the most important for Mother's Day to remind mothers is nourishing yourself. Because even though you don't have the same kind of time you used to have, you still do need to find the time to just work in, small throughout the day, grounding practices or practices that really bring you back to your essence. But attitude, we'll start with attitude. So attitude is something that I think just requires the parent to kind of shift their thinking a little bit and not actually change things that you're doing. And so some of those things, for example, I always say, like, if the Dalai Lama or the Queen of England came to your home and was sitting at your table and they asked you to pass them the pepper or pass the ketchup, think about how you would do that, with such royalty, with such reverence, with such appreciation. And then when you think about, you have your child at the dinner table, how do you pass them the pepper? It's usually not the same. But when you really think about it, we love and adore our child much more than we would adore the queen or a celebrity or a famous person who might be sitting at our table. So to the extent that we can remember to do that in our daily life, to remember how much we love and revere our child and kind of just use that opportunity throughout the day to remind yourself of that and then to act from that place. So that's one of the things. I think that when you think about when you first held your newborn baby, and so if everyone could just close their eyes for a second and just envision it. Doesn't matter what kind of birth you had. It doesn't matter if it went the way you wanted or not. But the minute you held that baby, the love that you feel pouring out of you towards this precious newborn, and it's just unconditional love that we all feel. And then when you think about, okay, so now you have your child who just did something that maybe you're not that happy with, but you have that same unconditional love for them. So sometimes if you can just remind yourself of the way you felt when they were born, and then just bring that feeling into the moment, no matter what's going on with them or with your relationship with them in that moment, to just kind of remind yourself, they're the same person, I'm the same person, the love is the same. So just let it pour out of you as it did when they were first born.
Wow, I love that. I was just going to say I love that, visualizing that. And one of the things I share on this show is, honestly, I want that unconditional love, because that's what oneness is all about, is unconditional love, understanding that everyone, not just your child, but everyone on the planet is a part of you, just like that child that came out of you. And if you can remember that unconditional love, just like you said, when you can envision it when they were born. And I thought about the moment that my daughter was born. That was my first, because that was a natural birth, and I did get to hold her shortly back. This is back in 1980s, where they didn't actually put the baby in your arm as soon as they popped out, which would have been nice. But when they got her all cleaned up and had me in my room, and I'll never forget just holding her and looking in her eyes and saying, okay, you were the one inside me kicking and doing all that. But, that's just but, yeah, so when you go back to that and remember, and then apply that not just to your children, apply it to everybody on the planet, everybody you meet.
Absolutely.
That same unconditional love, yes.
I agree with that. And I talked before about how sometimes it can be challenging to maintain a spiritual practice when you have children, but also it can enhance your spiritual practice when you have children. And I think that that's one of the reasons, because all of a sudden we feel this unconditional love pouring out of us that maybe we never even felt before. For some people, having your child is the first time where you really experience that unconditional love. And then once you've had that experience, then you can try to translate that into other people beyond your children. But your children can help jumpstart that sensation for you.
Very true. Yes. So true. So true. Actually, now, I love that visualization of going back to that moment when they first put your newborn baby in your arms, and just when someone is really getting on your last nerve, just kind of stepping back and going back to that place of unconditional love.
Exactly. And children, they really can, get on our very last nerve. Yeah. And the reason is because we have such love for them and such hope for them and such dreams for them. And when they do things that maybe get crosswinds of that, sometimes that can really set us off. So one of the other attitude changes that probably one of the most important ones that I think for parents is to, as much as possible, let go of expectations. Because it's so easy for us to buy into society's view of how our child, when they're younger, how they should behave. It makes me crazy when people say, is that a good baby? And what they mean by a good baby, of course, is it a baby who sleeps? Is it a baby who doesn't cry that much? As if a baby who's crying because they're uncomfortable somehow is not a good baby. But right from the beginning, we get those expectations from society that a child should be quiet, a baby should be quiet, a little kid should stop running around places.
I'm laughing because that is exactly. I was born in '62, and I was a preemie. I was only 3 pounds at birth, and I was in the hospital I was in the hospital in an incubator for the first 3 months of my life, which is all that right there is an experience of a child not getting the bonding with your parents from jump. I didn't have that bonding. But then when I got home, and I remember at very young age, as early as I can remember, my parents would talk about how I cried all the time. He was just a cry baby, and it made me feel so like you said, like I'm a bad child because I cried as a baby. And I'm serious. I heard this all throughout my childhood.
Wow. Right.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And like you said, you were probably crying because, first of all, you didn't have that connection in the first few months. There's a book, there's a scene in one of the essays that I talk about when my son was born, and he was born with jaundice. Now, today they send you home with the bilirubin blankets and lights, but when my son was born, they did that in the hospital, so you couldn't go home with your child. So after about 2 days, and they were ready to release me from the hospital, and the nurse said, don't worry, we'll take good care of your baby. You go home and sleep and come back in the morning. And I went home, and I came back first thing in the morning, and I walked into the nursery, and my son was screaming at the top of his lungs. And the nurse was just sitting there taking care of another infant. And when I walked over, frantically to pick up my son, she says to me, it's a cold, hard world out there. And the babies might as well learn that because they're going to learn it at some point.
Oh, my goodness.
Can you believe that?
Can
you believe that? But that was probably the biggest gift a person could have given me, because there I said, wow, what other people think about parenting, about children, about the world, I don't have to believe that.
No, you don't have to buy into that. No.
I don't have to believe that. So that freed me up to think whatever other people believe about children, I don't have to believe. Whatever people say about babies, your kid's making too much noise in this place, it's supposed to be quiet. Okay, you can believe that. I think kids make noise. That's part of who they are.
Exactly.
They run around. That's part of who they are. And we've created this environment that's so child unfriendly. Our society is so unfriendly to children that we don't allow them to run around or make noise like is natural for them. And instead of saying, wow, it's unnatural how we're expecting these kids to be quiet in all of these places, we say, oh, our kid is disappointing us because they're not being quiet in all of these places. And so I think parents really need to let go of, I don't care what other people think.
Right.
If my child is not behaving in a way they like, if my child is not doing, all of their homework and they don't want to do all of their homework, okay, I'm not saying you should just accept it. You should talk to them, try to figure out what's going on. If they don't get A's on all their spelling tests, I know some of my neighbors, if their children don't get A's on all their spelling tests, they're in like second grade, I'm talking. I'm not talking any grade where your grades actually mean anything.
Yes.
The parents get so worked up. Oh, my God, you better study more. You better stay home more. We're not going to do soccer anymore. It's taking you away. It's like, no, let the child be.
Yes.
And they'll figure it
That's
out.
so
They've
true.
got to find what works for them.
That is so true. And it's just so, it's generations of not allowing a child to be. Just let them be. Let them, because it's free, Let them be free to be who they are. And let them discover and learn the way they uniquely want to learn. It's so true. And I believe it is a different day and time than when I was born in the 60s, and I think your children were born probably in the late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah, in the early to the 90s. Yeah.
So it is definitely a total. And my children were born in the early 80s, and so it's definitely times have changed, which is great because science is showing so much about how important it is for that bonding. As soon as a newborn is born, now they'll put the baby on the mommy's tummy or in the mommy's arms before the baby is even washed off, just for that initial bonding, which is so important. And science has discovered how important that is. So when I think about how I was just taken away and put in an incubator because I was, and this is like early 60s, and to be that small, they weren't even sure if I was going to make it. Yeah.
Right.
But
to be saved at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. So, wow, we've come a long way, which is good. But that is very, very, very
to some
good.
degree, we've come a long way. Yeah, with a birth, I think we have come a long way. Although my son, was a natural at birth, and they put him right on my abdomen. But then when he developed the jaundice is when they couldn't send him home.
Okay. All right. Well, my son was an emergency C-section. The cord was wrapped around his head, and so they did an emergency C-section, and so I was completely out for the first few hours of his life because they put me under completely because it wasn't a planned C-section. It was an emergency C-section, so it was real frantic, But yeah.
Right, but that's why that exercise that I talked about, where you close your eyes and you envision the first time your child, that you held your child in your arms. For some people, that's the second after they were born. And for some people, it's not. But it really doesn't matter, because no matter what kind of birth you had, and no matter whether it went the way you wanted, or whether it was in the place that you wanted, or whatever the people who were there were supposed to be there who weren't, or whatever, it doesn't matter. The minute you hold that baby, all of that goes out the window.
Yes.
It's just you and your love for this new being that's blessed your life.
Yes. So true. Yes. So and
then
so
it's
you
about
said
trying to remember. Trying to remember.
And you were saying that the. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off. Okay. I was just going to say, you said that the book is divided into 3 sections. The attitude was the first section, and then the second section was
action.
Action. Okay.
So a lot of times people want to jump right into action. What can I do? What should I do? And sometimes when I've given talks about this book, a lot of times parents will say, what can I do so that my kids can be more spiritual? But for me, it's much more important. What can I do as a parent so that I can stay connected with that oneness that you talk about?
Yes.
And then bring that to my parenting. And whether my child meditates, whether my child seems to be interested in spiritual practices, whether they seem to embrace the notions of spirituality. That's not that important. What's most important for you as the parent is, am I connected and am I flowing that unconditional love as much as possible towards my children? So the actions that I talk about, even though a lot of these actions are actions that you can do with your children, primarily that's because parents spend so much time with their children. And so, again, it's about bringing pragmatically spiritual practices to your family so that you can be doing them along with them. So, for example, I had done a blog for Parents Magazine, 5 mindfulness activities you can do as a family. And again, the primary purpose is for the parents to be connecting themselves, but you're doing them with the family. So one is to take a listening walk, and that's really to go any place, and whether that's a backyard or a park, or whether that's a mall, or whether that's a store, a supermarket, wherever you're going. But the purpose of it is, let's spend a few minutes not talking and just really listening to the sounds that are always there that we ignore, that we don't pay attention to. So that really does help to bring your focus to the present moment, because you're really, focusing on listening to the things that are around you. Similarly, when we eat, a lot of times, you go to a retreat and you eat so mindfully, and then you go home and you don't do that at all. So, with kids, you're not really going to, unless they're older teenagers, you're really not going to say, let's have a silent meal. They're not going to go for that. But I think with younger children, you can say, let's spend the first 2 minutes of this meal not talking and really feeling the food in our mouth. I mean, kids love this. You say, smush around the food in your mouth and feel the way the ketchup squirts and feel the way the pea smushes when you take a bite, and really getting them to focus on the way the food feels and the way the food tastes. And, that's kind of a variation on John Kabat-Zinn, who's a mindfulness pioneer. He talks about putting a single raisin in your mouth, and I don't remember how many minutes, but it's a lot that you that you don't swallow the raisin, one raisin. You really just, feel it in your mouth. And that's a really powerful mindfulness practice, but that's hard for kids to do. So it's just like kind of like in the beginning of the meal, let's just really focus on the food. And then after the first minute or two, you might say, okay, now we'll just eat regularly. But because you've started the meal mindfully, even when you just eat regularly, everybody does pay more attention, and you pay more attention to what you're eating and how you're eating and how it feels. And then you can try a silent practice where you might say, in a certain morning, let's try to be silent for, depending on the age of the child, 10 minutes, half an hour. And again, that's about really trying to bring your awareness to the present moment. And when we talk, we're so busy thinking about what are we going to say and thinking about, just what you're saying, and it's all focusing on words, and we miss so much of how we're actually feeling in that moment. So silence, of course, as you know, is a very powerful practice in general, but kids can do it too. You can do it as a family for a short period of time. And so why not try to introduce it really and see how it goes? So those are just some of the mindfulness activities that I think you can do as a family. But then there are other actions that I think parents should think about maybe bringing into their lives and their house. For example, think about the art that you have in your house. Think about, what the decoration of your house is, what the feeling of the decoration of your house is. And is that the feeling that you want to be having when you're in your house? And maybe it is. Maybe it's a very soothing, or maybe it's energizing, whatever you're looking for. But I think a lot of times we kind of decorate mindlessly without really thinking about how is this setting up the environment of our home that I want to live with. I think who you hang around with. So think about, are there elevating people that you know that maybe you could invite over that you haven't been inviting over? You don't have to know them well, but maybe they're people from your yoga class or from your religious, if you're religious, from your community. Just somebody who really elevates you, who makes you feel good. And then that's enough of a reason. You don't have to say, but we don't have this in common, or they don't have children, or whatever. Just invite them over just so you can be in their presence. I mean, that's what people do with spiritual masters, right? You go to a guru, or you go to somebody to be in their presence. And there are a lot of people in the world who give off a good energy. So why not go be in their presence?
Yes.
And then some of the other actions, I think about rituals. I talk about rituals during the year. I talk about rituals, whether, that either mark a holiday or that mark, an event in your child's life or something that they've accomplished. And to kind of add a little bit of a spiritual dimension to that, to really think about it more deeply and more profoundly. And same with birthdays. I mean, you think about your birthday. That's the day that you transitioned into this universe, into this world. Right. And then we mark it after that with no mention of that. I mean, we have cake and presents, and we take the kids to Chuck E. Cheese or to, wherever. And I'm not saying we shouldn't. I mean, I think that those things are really fun. But I think why not also acknowledge that this was the day that your spirit transitioned into this world.
Right. Yes. Yes, and I love the term transition, because to me there's no such thing as death. All there is eternal life.
Right.
And we transition in and we transition out, and it's always our higher self who selects. It's always our higher self selection of when we come in and when we go out. So it's never an accident. There's never mistakes. It's always perfect and divine. So I believe that we should celebrate all birthdays and all transitions of when people transition out of the physical the same way, with the same celebration. When a baby's born, the whole family and friends are all excited. And when that person transitions back into spirit, it should be just as much of that kind of a celebration, because we're in society, we are not taught the truth about transitioning out of this life. It's it's made to be a sad. Now, of course you're going to miss someone's physical presence, but understanding that they're truly not gone. When you know that, not just believe it, when you know it, they're not gone. You can still communicate with them, and just knowing that it's all still interconnected. They're still connected to you. That just makes you want to just celebrate now that they're not limited by their physical body anymore. Or they're not. I
agree with that.
Yeah, they're not suffering.
I agree with that. But if you think about it, though, if that started with the birth, I mean, it starts on the day of the birth. You do recognize that something profound has happened on the day of the birth. But if you celebrated on a person's birthday, your children's birthday, if every year you celebrated, this is the anniversary of that profound moment when you transitioned from another world into this world, then when a person was ready to transition out, I think it might feel more natural. But it's because we kind of cut ourselves off from the birth being the the death being the, into the next. In between, we don't really ever talk about that.
Right. So true. So true. And it's just the way society has stigmatized it and just made us feel as if there's an end to life when there is no such thing as an end to life.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree completely. Yep.
This is so true. So the book is Changing Your Thoughts or Your Attitude, and then Action. And I love how you said action begins with the parent centering and connecting to their higher self. I say that all the time. I don't act from any place but. I have to first connect to higher self and first be in a peaceful state of mind before I can make any action outside of, because the action comes from that place of being. So it's about being before doing. So it's great that you said that about the parents first being grounded and connected, and then take action from there.
Yes, although sometimes some of the practices that you might do can help to ground. So, for example, when we talked about the eating mindfully, and then just sit for a minute in the beginning of your meal. So you might be harried, you might be making dinner, just came back from work or whatever, and you're throwing together dinner, and you're kind of all over the place, so you're not centered at all. And then you sit down with your family, and you say, okay, let's all take a minute and really taste what we're eating, really feel it, and feel the sensation of it, and feel how it tastes. You're doing that to center yourself. So even if you didn't start out centered, that kind of practice can really help to center you. I think, which I'm sure you talk about quite a bit, because breathing practices are so powerful to connect you with your child, and they're making you crazy. And one of my favorite expressions in the universe is to say, I'm beside myself. Because if you really think about what does that mean, it means that there's a self that you got beside. So you have to get back to that self. That's your core. That's your oneness. That's your inner peace. And somehow, instead of being connected to that, you got beside that. And I think that our children in a big way and make us, as we do it ourselves, but being around our children can sometimes facilitate us being beside ourselves. And so then if you can take a few minutes to do some breathing practices, just do some deep breathing, 3-part deep breathing, or any kind of breathing practice that maybe you learned in yoga or that you like to do, or just slowing your breath down, that can be a really powerful way to bring you back to yourself. So what I talk about in my book is a lot of times when my son was a very intense child, so he needed to be around me a lot, and he just sometimes, he wasn't that mellow when he was younger, and a lot of sometimes that would kind of take me beside myself, and so I would say, let's play hide and go seek, and I would run and I would hide behind a door, and an open door in my house, and my house wasn't that big, so it wasn't like it was going to take him that long to find me, but while he was looking, I was using that time to do some breathing practices, because that was how I was going to center myself. And if I would have said to him when he was 2 or 3 or 4, okay, let's sit now and do some breathing practices, he wouldn't have gone for that. But I needed to do the breathing practice for me. Parents talk about giving their kids a timeout. I always say parents need the timeout. You need to take the time out so that you can do a minute or two of breathing practices so that you can come back to the situation with a whole different mindset, being much more connected to that oneness. And it's from that place of oneness, of course, that you're going to react in a different way, that you're going to handle the situation totally differently than if you weren't connected to that place.
That is so true.
Those things
that is a great idea. Parents need the time out sometimes instead of the child, like you said, to breathe, because that's how I deal with it.
Yeah.
Yes, breathe. Yes, and
breathe.
That's such a great
way to center yourself.
Yes, it's just deep breathing, and that's a great idea you came up with. Is when the child you're getting beside yourself because of what the child is doing, and you'll say, "Okay, let's play hide and seek," and then you go hide so you can center yourself while the child is
hide. I needed that minute.
That is really a great idea.
And then he would find me. He would find me. He would be happy. He would think it was fun. Hey, you were hiding and I found you. It was all a good game. And by the time he would find me, even if it was a minute, by the time he would find me, I would be in a different place. I would be so much calmer. And that's what it's about, because when you can come from that place of connection, A, your relationship with your children is so much better. B, your own inner peace and happiness in life is so much better. And then C, you just come up with better ideas. You think better when you're coming from that place. You're not as affected by what society told you your children should be doing or how they should be behaving. When you connect, you know yourself. I like to talk about how parents should feel a lot more than they say no. And again, a lot of that comes from the way we've constructed our society. We make our houses, we decorate our houses. A lot of parents, this was not me, but I know a lot of people who do this, and they decorate their house so that they look beautiful, but they're not children friendly. So their own child can't roughhouse and can't go wild in the house because there's too many things that could break and too many delicate objects and things like that. And so the parent ends up running around saying, no, you can't do this. No, you can't do that.
Right.
That doesn't feel expansive to the child, and it doesn't feel expansive to the parent. You're not connected to your oneness when you're saying no all the time. Of course, sometimes you have to say no. Of course, if your kid says, can I go run in the street now? No, you can't, If your 12-year-old
can I
says,
play on the
can I spend the night somewhere dangerous? No, you can't.
Right.
But for the most part, we say no so much more than we have to. And the reason is because we haven't set up our environment to be more of a yes environment. So to the degree that parents can do that in their own homes with their own fewer rules, smarter rules, and a setup where you take all your delicates, take all your breakables, put them away. You'll have plenty of time to take them out, 10 years from now. I got candlesticks from a relative, beautiful crystal candlesticks for my engagement. I took them out about 3 years ago. They were in the closet between then and now. Been married a long time. But I always felt like if I put those out, I would worry that somebody was going to be playing in a way that was going to be dangerous for them. So I would rather play, let's have fun, and let's keep the candlesticks in the closet.
Right. Yes, so true, very true. To have the environment where the child feels like they can just explore the whole house and not have to worry about no. That's so true.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's better for the parent, though. It's better for you not to be saying no all the time. It helps to keep you open to your center, to your essence, to be saying yes much more often.
Yes.
And then the third section of the book is Nourish Yourself. So I think while the rest of the book is definitely geared towards moms or dads, the Nourish Yourself, while it's also good for dads, I really feel like moms need to hear that even more. Because I think dads are a little bit better about protecting what they need, and moms really just completely generalizing, not everyone obviously, but I think a lot of moms have decided there's no time left for me and I'm just going to accept that. And to the degree that there isn't time for you to be doing all the things you used to do before you had kids, of course, that's kind of a given. But you have to make a little time. You have to carve out something in your day and in your week that really makes you come alive. Besides your kids, yes, your kids make you come alive, but they can't be everything to you. And if you make them everything to you, then you're setting them up to be to feel like they have the weight of your happiness on them. And you can't do that to your kids. So you have to have things in your own life that make you feel excited, that make you feel good, that you're doing for you. And then when your kids are older, you can spend more time on them. While your kids are small, you can only spend a little time on them, but on yourself and on the things that bring you joy. But you can't forget that entirely. And I think that moms are really spend a lot. Don't spend enough time.
I was just going to say that's so important, and I stress that a lot on this show is the me time. And like you said, when you have small children, it's hard to find me time, but it is important.
So here are a couple of the ways that I found me time when my kids were very young. And the first thing is when you wake up in the morning. So a lot of times, the spiritual teachers always talk about how powerful the morning is and how you should do your breathing exercises in the morning. Well, if you have kids, the morning is usually pandemonium. But what I like to do is the minute you wake up, before you even get out of bed, and if your kids are in the bed with you, before they even know you're awake. So don't move, don't talk, don't let them know that you're up. And spend just a couple of minutes in the bed doing breathing practices before you get out of bed, because that will center you. If you get out of bed first and say, okay,
are you there?
Doing breathing exercise. Hello?
Oh, no, I thought we lost you for a second, but you're there. Okay.
Go
ahead. You were saying?
Good. Okay. If you wait until, I'm going to wait until later. I'm going to get the kids ready. I'm going to get them up. I'm going to start breakfast or whatever, and then I'm going to spend a few minutes doing breathing practices. Most of the time, it's not going to happen. So if you do it in the bed the minute you wake up, then that's a really powerful way to start your morning and to ensure that it's going to happen. Then another way that parents who are very pressed for time can take care of themselves is in the shower in the morning. So, okay, when you have little kids, maybe you don't even shower every day. But on the days when you do shower, why not spend, again, it's a shift in mindset primarily, to feel I'm a queen in my shower. And now letting the water pour over me and anoint me with life and with love. I remember when my kids were probably in elementary school, and I had to go on a business trip to Manhattan, and I stayed with a girlfriend who was single, who had an apartment in Manhattan. And I remember being most struck by her bathroom, because in her shower, she had all of these scented shampoos and this beautifully scented soap and these loofah sponges, and it just contrasted in my mind with my own shower, which had nothing in there, a basic shampoo and a basic unscented bar of soap. And I remember being in her shower and really feeling like royalty. Just things smelled so good, and I smelled so good, and it really made me feel good. And after that, I resolved, I'm not going to spend a lot of money on stuff, but I'm going to make sure my soap smell delicious, that my shampoo smells delicious, and that I spend a few minutes in the shower really allowing myself to feel like.
Are you there? Meryl, we may have lost connection. Meryl, if you, let's see. We're not hearing you. Meryl is calling in from a cell phone. She is away, and connecting with a cell phone is the only way she could connect, and we did lose her. So hopefully she will call back. She was giving us some great tips. And just to recap some of the tips that she just was sharing with us, if you have small children and you need to find some me time. Okay, here she is. She's back. Okay. Hi, Meryl.
Hi.
Are you there?
What happened?
Hi. Yeah,
Hello?
you got dropped. Sorry, that happens. I was just explaining to the listeners that you're calling in from a cell phone, and because you were away, and
for that.
That's hey, no apologies. It is what. So what I actually was going to, until you were going to call back. I knew you would call back, but I was just recapping for the listeners, because you were was kind of hard to hear you. But the two great pieces of advice you just gave, tips you gave about if you have small children, to do breathing exercises as soon as you wake up in the morning, before you get out the bed. Do some deep breathing exercises while you're still in the bed. And then also another opportunity is when you're in the shower to really just take your me time and just whatever makes you feel wonderful, the scent of the soap and the shampoo and all that. So I was just sharing that with them. But now you're back, so now you you tell us. Yes.
So a couple of other things. I think that parents, a lot of times, they think, I don't want my child exposed to movies that are, violent, or to books that are really horror-filled. And yet we don't question whether we want to expose ourselves to those things. And so I think if you want to think about, am I creating an environment in my own mind that's most conducive to connection with the oneness, then I think that you really need to assess, what images am I allowing in my own mind? Because most parents know, I don't want my kids to see that. Then why should we want ourselves to see that?
Exactly. So true. We talk about that a lot on my show. I stopped. My higher self told me a few weeks after 9/11 to turn off the news and don't ever turn it back on. And at that time, I didn't know why. I wasn't awake to the truth of oneness at that time. I didn't awake to the truth of oneness to 2007. But at that time, I was always kind of obedient from what I knew my inner self was telling me to do. And it was loud and clear, turn off the news and don't ever turn it back on. And I have not. I get all the news I need to know. There's no news that goes by that I need to know that I don't get. But I don't watch news.
Reading it. Yes, reading it, I think, is much more gentle to your own mind and your thoughts than seeing. Seeing
as far as mainstream news, it's not in my radar at all. No news. And then years later, I stopped watching the violence on television. And there's so much violence just in cartoons.
There's so much.
In
There's
cartoons.
So much violence. In everything.
Oh, my goodness.
In everything.
Yes.
You go to a movie that's supposed to be good for children and somebody's bleeding all over the place, or they're decapitated. I always said I never understand this. We rate movies R for sex so much, and then they could be G or PG and have a lot of violence.
Right.
But somehow, like, the sex makes it so terrible. I would much rather myself and my children see sex than
to see two people making love.
Exactly.
Yes.
Than to see somebody getting their head chopped off. I mean, I know it's it's
a matter
pervasive.
Of fact,
and if you just
exactly what you're saying, Neil Donald Walsh said on this show a few weeks ago. Exactly.
Oh, wow.
Yes. About it's better to have a child watch two people making love than, we think that's so horrible to have a child watch two people making love, but to see them shooting and killing and stabbing, and that's fine. He said the exact same thing a few weeks ago on this show. Yes.
Right. But I take it further. I don't think we should see it either. I think we should protect our own consciousness. It's not only our children.
Oh, definitely.
We should be careful. What do we read? What books do we read? What movies do we see? What TV shows do we watch?
After, I forget when, I want to say it was around 2010, I started watching now I don't have commercial television programming. I have Netflix and Hulu Plus, but I like to watch a lot of documentaries and things, inspiring shows. But I don't have commercial television. But before I got rid of commercial television, I decided I was only going to watch comedies or something that was uplifting or made me laugh. That was all.
That's great.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a friend once who said, you have to read this book. It's fabulous. All right, fabulous. I should have asked more questions, but I took the book. I started reading it. I could not believe how many people were killed and dismembered. But it wasn't even a horror book. It was just kind of in the course of the storytelling. And I thought,
my goodness.
Why do I want to expose myself to this? I do not.
Right.
So
exactly.
So I don't. I'm much more careful now. When people recommend books, I'm much more careful.
Careful, right. Well, when I awoke to how important our emotional state of being is. That's when I decided no more violent movies, no more violent television shows, which I never was big on it. Never big on it. But I did like back in, I guess, the 90s, late 90s, early 2000s, I liked like Criminal Minds and CSI. And I used to like those shows. And it's like, no more of those shows, because it's just what they show, all the gore of, they show all the person getting murdered and everything, they don't have a problem showing a decapitated head. I'm like, this affects me emotionally. So,
Absolutely,
and I can't, and my emotions are way too far, way important. I know how important my emotions are for my mental, physical, and spiritual health. It's all about my emotions. So I turned that off. I was like, nope, it doesn't make me laugh, or it doesn't inspire me in an uplifting way, I'm not watching it.
That's a very good test. Does it inspire me or make me laugh? Yep.
Yes.
And then just one other thing that I think parents really need to focus on is the things that really bring you passion before you have children. You need to, in some way, incorporate them back into your life after you have children. And especially things that you like to create. So whether that's dance, or whether that's art, or whether that's writing, or whether that's cooking, or whether that's flower design, things that really you bring forth to the world, I think is something that really gives people meaning and joy in such a deep way that you can't just put that off. Like, okay, now I have kids, I'm going to wait another 10 years before I do that again. You really have to find a way, how can I, in very small measures, implement that in my life right now? So you're not going to, probably, when my kids were little, I really felt like I wrote for magazines. That was my work. I worked part-time, and then I was with my kids part-time. And I kind of wanted to write a novel, but I just knew that wasn't the right time because they were so young. But I wrote other things. I really felt like I had to keep writing things for myself. And some of those things were the essays that became Enlightened Parenting, but also just other things that I wrote for myself. And then when my kids were older, that's when I wrote my novel. I think, if you love to cook, you're probably not going to have a lot of time to make 5-course meals for 30 of your best friends. Maybe you did that before you had kids. But when you have kids, maybe you're going to be able to bake an amazing dessert once in a while. But do that. Don't say, I don't have time for this, I can't do it anymore. You really need things that make you feel come alive. You really need to keep that in your life.
And that's so true, to always follow your passion, even if it's on a smaller scale when you have children, even if it's just taking a few minutes a day to do something like writing or cooking or whatever your soul and your passion. And by you doing that, you're demonstrating that to your children.
Right.
For them
That's true.
to always follow their passion. Yes.
That's
They'll
true.
say, okay, Mommy loves to do that, and she does it a little bit every day. Okay, I love to do this. I think I'll do this a little bit every day. It's just it's modeling that for your children, which is amazing.
Yes. Agreed.
Yes. These are all wonderful tips, isn't it? It's like I said, it's so wonderful. These are wonderful tips for parents and for moms especially, and it's Mother's Day weekend. What a wonderful gift.
Mother's Day.
To give mothers. Now, you have another gift to share with our listeners and our moms for Mother's Day.
I do, because it's another piece of fortuitous coincidence. I have a Mother's Day giveaway that ends actually this evening of 35 ebooks of my book, Enlightened Parenting. So that giveaway is still going on. It ends at midnight tonight. And you just have to go to my Facebook page.
We're global.
It ends Saturday
We're global,
morning,
so we have to let them know.
Nobody's drawing
Eastern
names until Saturday morning here. So.
Oh, okay.
Anytime tonight, it's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
And so you just have to go on my Facebook page, which is Meryl Davids Landau, And then the post at the top talks about the giveaway. And you just have to enter on that post. So very simple good. And 35 books, so your chances of winning are pretty good. And I think that it's a particularly good book to receive on Mother's Day because it's a gift to yourself to really remind yourself about ways that you can connect to your oneness as a parent. And the other thing that I think is really important for parents is the way I end the book, and that is that parents need to stop beating themselves up for not being perfect parents. And I think that mothers and fathers we hold ourselves to this impossible vision of what parenting is supposed to look like and what we as parents are supposed to look like and act like. And when we don't, we beat ourselves up. And, of course, beating yourself up is the exact opposite of connecting to oneness. You're disconnecting from your oneness. And so I love the teachings of Abraham Hicks. And so there's a quote. There's a quote at the end of my book. Everything is unfolding perfectly. And as you relax and find ease in your attitude of trust, knowing that well-being is your birthright, amazing things will happen. And I think that parents especially, we need to just remember that. Everything is unfolding perfectly. And we're perfect, so just relax and enjoy the ride.
And that is so, so true. Please, Meryl, share with our listeners how they can stay in contact with you.
So I have a website, Meryl Davids Landau, and that's Davids Landau, Meryl like Meryl Streep, Davids Landau. And on the website you can sign up for my mailing list. You can also read excerpts from my books, both the novel, Downward Dog, Upward Frog, and Enlightened Parenting on the website. And I also blog pretty regularly at Huffington Post. And there's also a link from my website to my blogs at Huffington Post, and a lot of those are on family and spirituality topics.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so, so much, Meryl, for being with us this Mother's Day weekend. This is, like I said, it's so divine timing. It's such a perfect gift for mothers, and you have a wonderful Mother's Day weekend because you're a mom.
Thank you.
You have two grown children that are going to probably treat you really good this weekend.
I hope so.
You have a great, wonderful weekend, and thank you so much for sharing with our listeners all these wonderful tips for parenting. And in this day and age, we definitely need it because we want our children, this new generation, to be more awake. It's all about the awakening the truth of who we are.
We do.
Awakening
so it starts
to oneness.
with the parents remaining awake.
Yes.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Have Mother's Day to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.